So I really wanted to have that peer-to-peer learning network. So guess what? If you can't find it, you make it. When I came to Singapore, I had no friends. The local university didn't actually take me in. I was just like, I'm a smart person, but why don't you want to take me in? It was just, lack of validation of that respect, rejection at the basic core of it. And then my dad lost his job. So it was a really difficult time. And I was thinking, okay, here I am. I'm 18. I've got friends who are thinking which party they would go to. And I'm thinking, how do I pay rent? I think I like the sense of adventure. It's like, oh, I don't understand it. I don't get it. Let's just try. Definitely in the beginning, I had to quickly learn to negotiate a renewal of a multi-million mobile contract that was going to expire in the 3 months' time. I had no idea how to do that. It's about building trust. And I think you build trust when you deliver. There was a time where in a space of 6 months, I had 3 surgeries, with an ectopic pregnancy, 2 IVF cycles, and another miscarriage, so 2 miscarriages. So my body actually physically gave up, and then my mind actually went with it.
In this podcast series, we're talking to inspiring leaders of procurement and supply chain. Join me as we explore their journey, their achievements, and their career advice. This way, you can integrate them into your career and achieve the same. I'm Marco Marambe, Managing Director at Procurato. Hi, we're with Claribelle Rohde today. She's Head of Procurement and Sourcing at Banking Circle. So, Clary.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good morning.
Yeah,
good to see you.
Look, Clary, so we think that there's probably so much that we can unpack here, and there's going to be a great story to talk about your career, which has been fantastic. So it'd be really nice if we could start with you as a person,
Okay.
to get to know you. So if we think about people considering, who is Clary? What is Clary? How is she? How is she as a person? I'd love to find out what your family would say. First, let's start with family. What would the family say about Clary? How would they describe you?
Maybe I'll think about what I think they would say. I'm not sure I've heard it from them, but a bit of a superwoman in a sense, like juggling a lot of things, keeping the house, the logistics, 2 boys, there's football, there's piano, there's everything, the house in order, but also at work, like being a full-time working as well, managing a team, but also being a daughter, keeping in touch with my family. I mean, we're all kind of like in different countries, the daughter-in-law as well. I have a great relationship with my in-laws, which is amazing. So yeah, it's just very well connected. I think a lot of people outside of my friends as well kind of lean on me when you want to talk about something. I feel like they feel comfortable doing that. So yes.
And you do a lot as well. You do a lot outside work as well.
Exactly, a lot of side work. So I recently co-founded with another amazing lady, this Women in Procurement Alliance in Luxembourg. It was just really inspired from an International Women's Day 2 years ago, where I saw women in IT and women in governance and women in law. And I was like, where's the women in procurement?
Yeah.
So I did look and I found a lot of networks outside of Luxembourg. So where I'm based right now, by the way. But I thought I really wanted to have that peer-to-peer learning network. So guess what? If you can't find it, you make it.
Exactly.
that's the thing.
Probably going to be a lot of your story as well, which is great. And so how would your friends describe you then?
Ooh, loads of energy. loads of energy. I mean, even at work.
I can vouch for that.
Yes. It's just this positive optimism that's kind of constant. And I actually once had at work, as we were in the kitchen making coffee, a colleague said, like, where do you get your energy from? Like, it's just like, it's a dreary day. And I just roll into the kitchen and it's almost like, yes, it's like energy bursts out of me and I can't contain it. So it fills the room.
I agree completely. Yeah. We met this morning,
yes.
Came into the coffee shop and literally everybody turned you like, we have a great chat, especially in a London day, all a bit grey and dreary, but that's the best part thing. So let's get into this. In terms of your career, let's go into this. Obviously, we usually say this, you don't just decide, I'm going to go and study procurement. At the age of 6, you go, hey, mommy, I really want to become a procurement leader. Some people might do, but generally speaking, it's unlikely. So it'd be really good to understand how you got into it. How did you stumble on it?
Yeah, I think I think you talk to every other procurement person and you're like, I got to it by chance. I didn't even know procurement exists. I mean, of course, there are now masters in procurement and, it's, formal education, and actually procurement as a career is really being much more established. But in general, as with most people, I got into procurement by chance.
Yeah.
But really, maybe if we kind of step back and look, into how I got here, a lot of the skills that I've learned being, where I am today is really a culmination of all the other jobs I've had even before procurement. So I started working when I was 18.
Yep.
And I was in Singapore at a time. So actually, a bit of context. So home for me have been 4 countries. I'm originally from the Philippines.
Yep.
And then I moved to Singapore and I studied my bachelor's degree, and then moved to London and studied my master's. And then now I'm based in Luxembourg. So I think home is in the reverse order now, I think, because it's like home, I guess, is also where your family is and everything. So, but yeah, starting there in Singapore, working quite young, I was a seminar organizer. So, learning to multitask, to be organized, that's kind of where I picked up. And then that was actually a period of adversity. And I think maybe we might touch at it at some point later, but I'll talk about that later. But in essence, it's also like I also became a receptionist in a spa in Singapore. Yeah. And then the manager saw my sales potential and I became a receptionist and sales. So I just had a natural knack, apparently, of selling people. I mean, to this day, I was like, if I sell creams or spa packages that are worth thousands, I even think to this day, I don't think I can put my money in that. But, at one point, my husband did say I could sell sand. I could sell sand in the Sahara. but no, I mean,
fridges to the Eskimos, as they say.
Yeah, customer service. I think that's kind of like really also a good procurement person's good at customer service, right?
Of course.
When my first kind of like proper job in a sense was in a school. I did a University of London distance learning degree in Singapore.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know about that. It's actually a well-established program. It dates back to
And there's a connection between Singapore and...
Well, no, it's got nothing to do with Singapore in a sense, because the University of London program, you can study anywhere in the world.
Oh, wow.
It dates back from where, the British Empire, they would send like British citizens overseas do not have access to higher education.
Yeah.
So that was where the program actually really started. So, and this is still the ethos of the program, that if you can't afford for whatever means, financially, or sometimes even family, you can actually study and get and obtain a University of London degree.
Oh, wow.
So it's actually harder because you have to self-study, or actually get tuition these days, which is available. But you have to bridge that gap yourself because you don't get, you're examined in the same standard as a student. So I got my degree. It's from the University of London. University of London also quite complex, but from the London School of Economics and Information Systems and Management. And I was working and studying at the same time.
Wow. Yeah, again, as always, lots of things that you were involved in starting from the beginning. That's incredible. So
I started. My first jobs was actually marketing and operations. I also worked in India, setting up the new school there. Wow. And when I always wanted to really study my master's, I only had one choice. It was always just LSE.
Yeah.
And it was always just this master's in information systems and management. I remember filling in the UCAS forms like, do you have any second choice? I'm like, no, that's it. And one choice, it's that or nothing. So I was really...
One only, that's it.
So I was overjoyed when I got, the scholarship.
Amazing.
So that's also, grateful. Sometimes I also think of like the unknown people who donate, to these kinds of causes, because it does, I can't say thank you directly to them, but if you support a scholarship fund or anything, it really goes to changing somebody's life. And That's me, actually.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think of this often myself around the fact that, there are people who do these donations, you get the scholarship, and there's nothing specifically in return. Like we run programs to do graduate scheme things. So at the end, you expect that maybe they stay with you for a year, or you maybe put an agreement, but you do these scholarships pretty much pure on donation on changing someone's life. So yeah, anyone who's listening and thinking about this.
Yes.
Go ahead and do it, right?
No, go ahead and do it. It will change someone's life, that's for sure. And so that allowed me access to be able to come here to London.
Yeah.
And didn't know anybody. It was really, I think there's one thing about me as well. I think I like the sense of adventure. It's like, oh, I don't understand it. I don't get it. Let's just try.
Give it a go, yeah.
Let's just try. I actually got it. I'll credit my mom.
Yeah.
With that, yeah. I'll credit my mom.
And why? And why'd you say that?
Because I still remember this story of when I was young, and we ordered a drink. We were in a restaurant. We ordered my favorite drink. It's for any Filipino, it's sagot gulaman. It's basically jelly and kind of like bubble tea or something like that. Okay, so it is a drink, and it came to me, and then there was a big fly. And I look at it, and I was kind of like on the verge of tears. I was like 5 years old, maybe 6 years old.
There was a fly in your drink.
A big fly in my drink.
5.
And I said to my mom, there's a fly in my drink. And then my mom asked me, what do you want me to do about it? I was like, could you go and change it? And she's like, well, you can go and change it yourself. And it just didn't dawn on me that I could do that. It's like, no, I'm a child. Like, why? And she's like, well, you have 2 choices. Either you drink it, or you go to out to the counter, ask for the manager, and ask this drink to be replaced. And then, at one point I did consider drinking the drink, and then I thought, no, I'm gonna conquer my fear. And there, my mom was giving me a bit of a safe space to do that, and so I went up to the manager and said. Actually, I just went up to the staff and I said, like, can I speak to your manager? In a very shy little girl voice. I said, why?
That must have been super
there's
cute.
A fly in my drink. And they were so apologetic and they gave us free dessert and all these things. So, and it kind of like that early learning gave me that feedback of, if you want something, you ask for it, you get it nicely. If you ask nicely as well, obviously. But yeah, it's kind of important.
It's incredible how some of these life-changing moments. You were very young there, but there is that switch, I think, probably when I got into that was way later. I must have been 12 before I plucked up the courage to go and speak to anyone like that. So, as usual, half the time.
So guess what? I mean, I teach my kids the same.
Yeah.
I've got 2 boys, and then I'm just like, well, you
got to do it.
But
you want something, you go for it.
Yeah. And I still do that to a certain extent these days with my team. Like, I allow them to say, well, I know that I know that I'm there.
Yeah.
If things go wrong, go south, or it doesn't work out, there's still opportunity to step in.
Yeah.
But I think giving that space and creating that safe space for others is also a huge confidence as well. It takes a while of courage
to get things done. Good.
Yeah.
So then I think you got into sort of sales at that point. Were you pretty much before you encountered procurement, I would say?
Yeah. So my first job, after my my degree in London, that was the collapse of the Lehman Brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. And also that's where I met my now husband. But I didn't apply for graduate schemes because the intention was I go back to Singapore, and we decided, okay, we'll stay here. So my first role was as a performance and risk headhunter for a startup recruitment firm. I had absolutely no idea what buy side is, what performance and risk or quant analysts do. I literally had like zero idea. And I think that's kind of like very common with the theme of procurement. You often get to buy this and you're like, I've never bought this before in my life, but I'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. But yeah, it was good foundation.
Yeah.
That recruitment job. It taught me a lot of things. For one, a lot of the confidence I think I have today to pick up the phone or establish a connection with a C-level or anybody came from that. I had to make 80 not just phone calls, but conversations. So every time you kind of like pick up the phone and someone's kind of like want to sell you something, that's actually really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
I picked up a lot of my interviewing or even questioning and probing skills.
Yeah.
Open-ended, when to ask an open-ended question,
All right.
when to be leading.
Yeah.
And I use it a lot with my stakeholder engagement when I'm trying to, first maybe I'll start with an open, what do you want? And then I'll probe and I'll lead and I'll redirect until we kind of establish an understanding and have challenged their assumptions. Or sometimes they reflect like, I didn't think of it that way. But I just asked questions.
That's it. That's an incredible point, because a lot of the skills that we have, of course, as you say, on the other side is having to ask these sort of questions, which are, as you say, leading, questioning at the right time.
Yeah.
What you're trying to find out, all the things that also a good salesperson does is effectively listens, as people say, and it's true about procurement. So that's a great base for you to start, I suppose. And
so,
it must have given you a good sort of confidence.
Yeah.
Then how did you get
into procurement?
Yeah, how did
you actually, the other side of the recruitment job was I got to interview a lot of people from different stages in their career, right? And, some successful, some kind of feeling stuck, some purposeful about, okay, here's my next step. And it actually allowed me to reflect on what I want and what I don't want.
Yeah.
I didn't still know what it is. I didn't want to be, at one point I was offered a job to be a performance analyst because in order to interview the candidates and to suss them out if they were actually great, I did learn, some basic formulas, some basic sort of, it's just to kind of know, like, are you competent at the basic?
Yeah.
But I thought it wasn't something I'm interested in. But it did allow me to reflect on what do I want? But it just allowed me at the very beginning of my career, and I think it's kind of like a theme to be self-aware.
Yeah.
It's like, what do I want? What do I want? What am I good at, but I don't like doing? Because it doesn't mean that I'm good at it, that I actually like doing it, right? Or what is it that I'm not good at, but I need to do or I want to do? And then, I actually got the role as a technology sourcing specialist at the largest British insurance company where, in fact, you and I met.
Yes.
That's where you and I met. So that's great. And I didn't know what the job was. I knew it was IT. So I was always interested in something IT, with my background. But I was never a technical person. I was more into the management, organizational change. At one point, I thought I would be a business analyst. At one point, I thought I was going to be an information security risk person. That didn't pan out. I did apply for those roles, but sometimes the universe has a way of telling you that's not for you.
No. What you're good at is this.
Yeah. So and then in the very beginning, I just knew it was IT buying.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, IT and something, right? And my first 3 months, I had to negotiate. I don't know, for 6 months, I'm not sure, but definitely in the beginning. I had to quickly learn to negotiate a renewal of a multi-million mobile contract that was going to expire in the 3 months' time. And I absolutely had no idea how to do that.
Well, talk about throwing in the deep end. Hey?
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's just like sink or swim. But I think, that was, I just got hooked into procurement. The whole fact that there's always constantly something that you learn.
Yeah.
You have a breadth of knowledge.
Yeah.
Maybe there are certain procurement specialists who become, deep dive in a particular category.
Yeah.
Or even a subcategory, and you can do that. But generally, there's just like access.
Yeah, of course.
To a whole breadth of knowledge, access to a whole lot of stakeholders, internal, external. You're this hub. And, you connect different spokes in the business, internally, externally, or even connect knowledge. And it really spoke well to me because I found out that I love connecting the dots, and I'm actually pretty good at it. So there you go. So I think that's where I got hooked into procurement.
Great. And you were talking a little bit about self-awareness earlier on. You must have looked at this and thought, what am I actually, this role is really good for me. What am I good at what can I do well? Which skills am I good at? Did you immediately identify it, or did you start seeing things as you were talking about earlier on?
Yeah, I did start seeing things. So there was an expectation in my role that you're self-reliant on, for example, negotiation.
Yeah.
Right? And not just commercial negotiation, contract negotiation. And I realized I'm not really that well versed with contract negotiation. In fact, I mean, I don't think I've read a contract that much until I've seen this. Maybe the first contract I've read was my employment contract or something. But yeah, I think there's as a procurement person, you really build an arsenal of skills.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there are kind of and you progress through it, and the self-awareness I speak of it right now, kind of like looking back. I'm still learning, but as you said, I like to think in threes as well.
Yeah,
I think there are three in your arsenal of skills. There's three skills I could group into three skills. The first one will be more of our the technical skills that any procurement person will need.
Yeah, of course.
Basic ones. Contract negotiation.
Yeah.
It was really a gap for me. So a couple of things that I did was proactively. I said, okay, well, I need to learn the theory. I mean, some learn by application. It again, self-awareness is understanding how you learn.
Yeah.
Right. Some people are just no, just put me. I apply. That's it. I only learn. I've always been kind of I complement my learning with the theory and the application. Then it stays with me.
So you do the searching as well, research and all that sort of understanding, because a lot of people are used to that. Just jump in, do it, and learn it like that. And of course, as you know, we were lucky that we were in a firm which had the means to invest in getting us to get some training as well. But a lot of it was probably applied, right?
A lot of it was applied, but so I did the SIPS diploma where I got the basics of contract negotiation and concepts we apply today, like BATNA or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's still, it's core foundational skills, kind of like learning the alphabet.
Of course.
And before you kind of construct an essay or a novel.
Yeah.
So it was really a good foundation for me. Category management, these are technical. And then as I progress, category management, risk management, these are sort of the skill sets that I still remember sitting at a risk module in my degree. I was thinking, what's got to do with things? There are certain things that you do take away, with mitigating, assessing, and
of course.
Well, how do you actually manage risks? So I mean, I think these are the kind of the core technical skills that it's a combination, at least for me, of some learn and right now I think as I progress, it's probably not so much of the reading of the books, but it's more around workshops or conferences, podcasts.
Yeah, learning from
that kind of learning, audiobooks. And it's a bit of a trial and error. Some techniques kind of work for you, or some kind of modes of learning doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
But again, it's about that self-awareness. What works for you? And if it doesn't work, then try something different. But,
and for those who would be probably curious at this point, you did that massive negotiation. You had your skills, which is clear, obviously. Your communication, your research style, your ability to have the energy, probably bringing people along with you as well. You got into that. You did your how did that big project go for those who are curious?
The first one, that was a big win. Because number one, it was my first time that I was, working with something that I felt like we're gonna fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that nobody was interested, but there were other big projects, transformation programs, and all these things, which was, warranting attention. But it was also that element of future thinking. I was thinking, well, what's a strategy here? What's the future? Do we just renew, or do we just consistently renew? I mean, even at this stage, I was thinking of, well, what does unified communications mean? Are we ready? And then also kind of accepting, well, in 3 months, you're not going to achieve that. So, get this, keep the lights on, and then you think strategy later on. But I mentioned about the arsenal of skills, and just want to make sure that I cover that one too.
Yeah.
So the other technical skills and the other two will be more, and they're interrelated, right? Interpersonal skills, and I think the emotional skills.
Yeah.
And I I said it's an arsenal. Because
Yeah.
in any given situation, particularly in negotiations, you kind of pick the right tool
Yeah.
for the right job, for the right situation, the right context, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, interpersonal, I think that's really, maybe for me, it's natural to build that kind of rapport. I kind of thought why. Actually, I was reflecting, like, how is that something that either it comes naturally? I think it also can be for people, for example, where it's not natural for them. Then you have to be intentional. I mean, if it's not natural, then you have to be intentional to build that rapport.
We had I was having another guest here. We're discussing about this introvert extrovert element of it, which is very connected to this interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
I think it's suffice and safe to say that you're probably more of an extrovert, but maybe a mixture of the two. So then how did you use that skill to sort of bring along people? Because especially in the industry we were working at back then, I think it's probably right to say that there's quite a few introverts there as well.
Oh, yeah.
They're quite thinking. So you've done this project, you're using your 3 skills in your arsenal, and you're actually going through this project, realize that it's unachievable, some of these things. You got a great win, you still were successful with it, but there were some elements which were not working. How do you bring people along when you are an extrovert and you're having to deal with some introverts as such?
I think I'm going to borrow from Carla Harris, because I was recently listening to some of her podcasts, and it really rang true to me when she said, bring your authentic self.
Yeah.
Because when you're authentic and people see that, they will be authentic to you. So I'm not going to change them if they're introvert and make them an extrovert. I'll just, work at the level that they're comfortable to speak, establish some connections. Like, oh, you love running. Okay. Or maybe there's something that I could give, some advice. And normally, and I think that's also the other thing I learned in procurement, people buy people. That's it. People deal with people. People buy people. You can give them all the facts, the rationalization, like, hello, but if they don't trust you, if there's no bridge or connection there with your authentic self, then no, then it doesn't go very, very far.
Yeah.
Right. So the authenticity, I think, is actually really, really important. And again, with that self-awareness, I was just realizing that when I go to a conversation, I don't try to be somebody else. I don't try to be either. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of this women versus men kind of like, talk. No, I don't try to be another person. I just bring my entirety of myself.
Yeah.
And into and then quite often that builds a lot of trust. It kind of pulls down the guard, like it kind of like draws
breaks
down
the barriers.
Exactly of a person, and they realize, well, I'm talking to someone who's genuinely authentic.
Yeah,
like they're not pretending, they're not in a mask, they're not. I mean, of course, we all have different motivations or intentions and everything like that. And the same thing, I'm actually interested to know what your intention is. What's your motivation? What keeps you going? And it's not like a zero-sum game or a competition. It's like, well, if I understand you, then we can work together.
Yeah. So I would say that sounds, to use 2 parts you put together into one, is you're intentionally authentic.
Yes.
Which you do that purposefully without even sort of thinking, I'm going to be different, or try and adjust. Because there's different ways, right? When you want to, especially, so going back to that part of your career where you are in that beginning stage of your procurement career, you're learning what you're doing. You could go and I'm going to adjust myself to whoever senior stakeholder I'm speaking to, or you can be intentionally authentic, as you have been, and bring yourself there and have a conversation, and they maybe work with you in a different way, or they actually see a spark or something great. I assume that's what you are effectively saying.
But it's interesting that you mentioned that, because in the beginning, I wasn't like that too.
Okay.
I was trying to think of like, how can I be like them, or how can I be like that person? And I think it comes with, I guess, slightly maturity and experience. Mirroring is another technique, right? When you mirror either body language or I don't know, even in thoughts or manner of speaking. If you speak fast, that you speak slow, and person speaks rather slow and muted, then you just mirror them.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's a lot. I learned through also watching.
Yeah.
I think the key theme here is, as you mentioned, intentional.
Yeah.
I intentionally watch as well, like there was a global head of procurement that I was working with, and she was very good with stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
But she was able to navigate through, differing opinions, and I just watched how she did it.
Yeah, and I bet that's it's always inspiring in that way when you can see to the point here of mirroring and seeing someone on the other side, which is someone who you can relate to as well, as you say, this person that you looked up to. She seemed to be senior, very capable, and you probably watched that and went, well, she can do it, I can do it, and that probably helped you. So we're in that part of your career.
Yes.
You're developing further. You've now got a few skills in you. You've learned quite a few things. You've got a few contracts under your belt. You've got a few projects under your belt. And you're starting to deal with more and more, I suppose, senior stakeholders, actually probably leading a little bit a group of people. How did you find that at that point in time? Because now we're looking at different skills. You're having to actually get people to see what you're seeing or work with them and make sure that you're going towards a common theme. Let's get into that. How did it first start, and what skills did you use at that point?
I think
of your arsenal.
For arsenal, right? Well, the third one was around emotional skills, right? I think there's this element of, and I kind of alluded to that already about being authentic, but it's about building trust. And I think you build trust when you deliver. Mm-hmm. At very early stage, I had this, kind of like, can you just get this contract done? I remember we even called contract monkeys for that reason, because it was like, okay, I can't influence anything anymore for this one. But if I realize, like, look, if I can get this done for you, right, and if I earn your trust, and if I deliver and I say, okay, here's how I'm going to deliver. There's a lot about expectations management as well. And I think, as you said, as you're kind of leading into this whole teams or cross-functional sort of like teams, which is also still a kind of like leadership, right? You get into the stage of like, it's not just about stakeholder engagement, it's also about expectations management or expectations alignment. That's an art, it's a skill. Yeah. All right. Okay. Because expectations differ, intentions differ, and then the execution is also. Sometimes I've also been into negotiations where, okay, we're all different ways to skin a cat. Mm-hmm. So what we might come to it in a different way. Yeah. And that's where. But let's not disagree on the way. Let's agree on the objective. Yeah. And that's actually really powerful, I've found, when you can identify a common objective amongst different sets of people, because they will have their own, right? What are they measured? I'm only really measured in this one. I don't care about the rest. And I'm only measured about this one, this bit. And And I'm like, yes, I'm not really measured here, but I'm interested in it. And there will always be like this different kind of dynamics. Yeah. And then pulling that together and, like Lego and, building something out of these different building blocks. Yeah. That's interesting. So there can be, and I was going to ask, there can be different ideas, ways of doing things. Sometimes creates a bit of conflict. Yeah. But what you suggest someone does is, let's actually identify an objective as a group, irrespective of all the little changes that you may have. If you have an objective together, then at least you're putting a point of interest. That's an interesting way of approach, and I can see that actually as something which reflects for a lot of people who have achieved a lot. We're all different. We've all got different departments and interests that we have. So it's only natural that you've got this situation. Great. So you're going through this. You've learned a few skills. You've actually got a few projects. You're influencing people. Talk to me about a little difficult conversation you may have had. difficult could really be either just, your personality
Clash.
don't clash. I've also learned that there are just some people who they don't have to have rhyme or reason. They just don't like you.
Yeah,
That's it. You can try to establish, and I think it's around finding an element of commonality, the minimum common denominator. I think one of the things is that quite often when I've found myself in situations of a difficult stakeholder, is really thinking back to one of my LSE lecturers. He said, "What's in it for me?"
Mm-hmm.
So trying to understand what's in it for me, but what's in it for him or her, for you.
Of course.
What's in it for you? And at least if I can establish that minimum thing, I have a language or a platform to kind of bridge and connect us.
Yeah.
Because, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter what the situation is. If I don't understand or if I can't articulate as well what's in it for me from that person's perspective, it will be very, very difficult to win that person over. I can use all my charm and disarm, my interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we particularly in the workplace, right? We different people have a different ways of maybe working, and they just it's at the core.
Yeah.
What's in it for me? And if I can establish that and replay it back in the language that they can understand, I quite often that actually breaks down the barriers to engagement.
Probably that's one of the good leads on nicely to our conversation around support, like the mentorship and support that you had from your manager in that case, sponsors. How important has that been, not only at that part of your career, but generally across your career? And what would you advise people to do to find the right people to support you?
So you've got different people that you lean on, and I think I think there are mentors, there's allies, there are sponsors, as you mentioned. So mentors. I had this idealistic idea before that I'll find a lifelong mentor. I mean, you watch those movies, and you're like, oh, they're lifelong mentors and stuff.
Yeah.
But I've had several mentors, and I think some of the mentors were just like over a month, a very short period of time. So some have been over a longer period. But yeah, I think one of my mentors was actually a coach, and at this point in time, I had this desire to be heading up a team or leading a team.
Uh-huh.
Right. And I wanted to be a manager, but I didn't want just to be a manager. I wanted to be a leader. I think there's a difference between both. And I couldn't find opportunities where I was. And so we were discussing about it. And then she just asked me these questions like, what do you think makes a good manager or leader? And have you had one? And I said, I don't think I've had one. I mean, I didn't have bad managers. I've been fortunate enough to have good ones, but I was just like, no, for me, a manager is not just a manager, it's a leader. And it's just that, well, take that away and you now know how not to be a manager, how not to be a not so good manager. And I was like, okay, that's double negative, but okay, it turns out to be a positive. But in essence, it was more like you learn from the mistakes of others, or you learn from what others don't do well. You pick up the ones that works well for you, and you influence that. It's just something came across my mind as we were talking as well a while ago, because there was an element of you can't change how people think.
Yeah.
Or who they are. I mean, it applies to your parents too, or whoever, right? But you can change who you are, or how you think, or what kind of a mother or a boss or what kind of a person you want to be. That you can influence, right? Mm-hmm. That you have control, and that again comes back to intention. But you mentioned about mentors. There's allies. I think I was thinking about allies, and there are peers, colleagues. I think that's very important. Even if you, complain about, this, that, and the other. They're still an ally because, you get a sounding board with them. So I think that's also important. I think my husband has been a very key ally for me.
Of course.
Yes, I think we've been key allies to each other in our careers, actually. I think I know that when he has been successful, he's always shared that with me. And, the saying, behind a great man is a woman. There you go. But I think it goes the other way around as well. Yeah. All right? Behind every great woman is a man, in a way. So actually, that's kind of good for me. And sponsors is something that I just learned recently, especially now at this level that we operate in, that, you want someone to be talking to you, talking about you positively, obviously, but, championing you when you're not in the room. In all of these things, I think there's an element of intentionality. Again, it goes back to that, the self-awareness and intentionality. Like, what works for me, what works for them. I've had mentors who learned a lot from me as well as I learned from them, which is interesting because I thought it was a one-way relationship. And I realized it was a two-way. But I think that those are the things that are really important and key.
Yeah. And do you feel like maybe there is a different type of ally and mentor or sponsor that you need or have throughout your career? Or is it just a simple level of maturity in your career that brings you the right people along? Do you have to be intentional at searching them? That's what I mean.
You have to.
Yeah.
I think you have to. I think it has to be intentional, but it has to be also as well organic.
And I'm assuming we're talking about the more senior people at this point, right? Where you're going after a mentor and looking for a mentor. Tell us how you sort of go about this.
It could be as early as in your career, actually. In fact, for example, so at LSE there's an alumni mentoring program.
Yeah.
And I've been mentoring a lady, and she, we just randomly got connected.
Okay.
And sometimes that's the thing, right? You apply for a lot of these mentorship programs, corporate or alumni, there's the randomness in it. So there's an element that it may or may not work. But I think there's an element as well of intentionally being able to give back or also be willing to receive. So yes, it will be great. Sometimes you don't have to look far as well, because it could just be a colleague. It could just be, the head of a particular department. But the first time I actually asked for someone to be a mentor, in fact, one of the first ones, it was actually the CFO of this company. And I went up to her and it's like, awkwardly, could you be my mentor or something like that? I didn't even know how to learn. Exactly. It's like asking someone, could you be my friend? But you'll be amazed how people are receptive about it, about how they're willing. It's just that obviously at the same time, I think there are a lot of people, particularly experienced people, who are happy to share their experience, but they're not gonna throw themselves out there and publicly publish and say, I'm now, I have availability to be a mentor. Does anybody want that? But it also can come in the form of coaches, right? So nowadays, coaching is so prevalent, I think, a lot more than we were at the beginning of our careers. So lean on that. I mean, there's a lot of resources right now.
And it's interesting, exactly what you said. You went to the CFO, and it's pretty senior, probably at whatever part of your career. It's quite a daunting thing to do. And you probably have that little worry about they're too busy, they will never say yes, all of that. But I agree with you. You'll be surprised at how many people would be more than happy to and willing to, if you go there and ask, look, I need some support, or it'd be great to tap into your advice. Makes a difference, doesn't it? So when we are going through your career and your life, it's a natural progression of things, right?
Yeah.
Time passes, you become better, you do a lot of great things, but your personal life also is part of that journey, right? So it'd be good to understand at this point now, you've got more responsibility, you've got lots happening.
Yeah.
Obviously, personal life also influences, you get married, you have kids, all sorts of things which are part of it. Is there something or a point or maybe something that people don't know about you that really influenced your career at some point on a personal level?
Sure. I think adversity for me, I've learned, is a friend that forces you to look into the mirror and see who you are, who you really are, or to discover who you are, or who you can be. I think there were two key pivotal moments in my life where I experienced adversity, which shaped me a lot. I mentioned when I was 18, I started working very early in Singapore. But when I came to Singapore, I had no friends. The local university didn't actually take me in. I was just like, I'm a smart person, but why don't you want to take me in? And then just, lack of validation of that respect, rejection, and I mean, at the basic core of it. And then being, my dad lost his job, so it was a really difficult time. And I was thinking, okay, here I am, I'm 18, I've got friends who are thinking which party they will go to, and I'm thinking, how do I pay rent?
Oh, wow.
And that's a difficult, it forced me to mature very early, but it also...
And this is in Singapore.
In Singapore.
Of all places.
Of all places, exactly. I mean, even like, how do I get my visa extended? I mean, it was an existential sort of like, situation. But I learned there very early on to trust God. And I think that's actually kind of very key for me. And, different people will have different anchors in their life. But for me, that's where I learned how to trust learn the value of what's enough, to learn to accept grace and generosity. And that's really been key throughout. And it kind of built on to the second personal adversity. And this one was when I was already in procurement. I was, as you said, closing deals, negotiations, like people were trusting me with big projects, very good. I was, very visible, getting great feedback. And we were going, my husband and I, we started our, we want kids. And, for some people, I realized it was easy. And then it's just like that. And then for us, it wasn't. That was a shock. There was a time where in a space of 6 months, I had 3 surgeries, with an ectopic pregnancy, 2 IVF cycles, and another miscarriage, so 2 miscarriages. That all in a space of 6 months. Every medical procedure, I went back to work, and my colleagues knew none the wiser. I didn't want to say anything. I was afraid. I had a fear that if I said something, I would be passed over for a promotion.
Yeah.
Or, they would say, oh, don't involve her in that project. She's going through something. And it's not necessarily meaning maybe it's good intentions, but for me, I was just like, no. I'm a fully capable person. Like I can do this, until my body said, no, you can't. So my body actually physically gave up. And then my mind actually went with it.
Yeah, of course.
It's really interesting. I mean, obviously nowadays we talk about mental health, and I applaud a lot of that, awareness as well.
Yeah.
Because it's a real thing.
Yeah.
I realized it's easier to see someone and say, oh, you've got a broken foot, or you're an elbow or whatever, a shoulder, and sign off work and recover. But your physical body is not actually separate from your mental as well. So at that point in time, just all these things that happened to me in a short space of time, plus me trying to be that superwoman that I thought that I would be, my body just said, stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
And it's incredible how, it's sort of it's a natural thing which had happened to you at that point in time. But it's incredible how, different people take it, especially, dare I say, from a women's point of view, there's always a angle of, oh, I'm working really hard, I'm showing that I'm strong, I'm doing all this great stuff, I've got a great career, that I'm not going to let that very natural thing which can happen to a number of people stop it. And it must have, it probably had a significant impact on you, but then at some point it stopped. So I appreciate that, you must have been concerned, as you expressed. How did you sort of tackle this once you came back on the other end? Did you just go, right, I now know what I'm doing, And did you have a lot of support, I suppose, around you in terms of your colleagues and everyone else to kind of push you along?
Yeah. So support came in many different ways.
Yeah.
And I think because the first experience of having nothing taught me to actually lean on and be welcoming with help and asking for help.
Yeah.
I think that was what the first thing taught me to begin with, is to learn when you need help. And, so I was grateful I had a very understanding line manager. Grateful that we had a head of department who was also very understanding of the personal situation. So I wasn't public about it. There were a couple of colleagues who knew about it. I even had one colleague who took me to the hospital when because I had a miscarriage while at work. So it's literally, these kinds of people who really supported me emotionally. At one point, we talked about mentor. There was a CTO at that company where, we had no other connection apart from maybe a couple of conversations on certain projects. But he was going through a similar thing, infertility and, losing a child and everything. So we were WhatsApping. In the middle of the night, right?
Yeah.
And, it was for a short period of time, but that was like those little anchors.
Yeah.
Kind of that just kind of tether you a little bit, makes you ride into the next wave.
Yeah.
So, at one point, I remember I said, okay, I needed to change. So I left the organization, but I just said, I just needed to change.
Yeah.
In general, I needed to change the scenery. And I went contracting and, I was actually offered, again, there was like a pivotal moment in a career because I was being offered to be, at least I had an opportunity to head up global procurement, but I had to base myself in New York. And I was like, well, I could explore that. And maybe if I want to go for it, I can do it. But I wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
And I knew like career will happen eventually. So I remember this one conversation, was our anniversary, my husband and I just blurted out, what if I quit work? And she's like, yes, you should do it. It's like, what, I can? I was like, really? We can do, I can do that? It's like, yeah, financial will be okay. I think that's also important. And some couples probably don't have that particular privilege, but I was glad that we could. We maybe one less holiday, or we don't take the holiday this year or anything like that. But, you take the break that you need.
Yeah.
And I remember going up to my manager and I said, like, look, I'm thinking of quitting. It's like, do it. It's the best decision you'll ever make. And just the support of people, it's amazing. And the more, what I realized with infertility, and that's why I think I'm also very open about it now, is that the more that you talk about it, the more that you realize that someone has an experience of it. Like in his case, it was like, I think his friend, his sister, or a friend, a close friend was also going through the same. And you actually experience a lot of grace and empathy from people. But it comes at the price, well, we didn't say the price, but it comes with vulnerability.
Yeah.
And allowing yourself to be vulnerable, which I think we talk about career, we talk about go-getting and everything, but we also talk about authentic self. But when you're vulnerable, people, of course, okay, hopefully you don't experience it when people take advantage when you're vulnerable. But I think when you surround yourself with people and choose people who you can be vulnerable with and that you can trust, you actually build that amazing sort of like support network that, gets you through.
Yeah. And been through a tough time. And thank you for sharing that with us, Clary. So obviously that didn't stop you at all from becoming who you are and having a really great, successful career. So managing and balancing that personal life with work is so key. And it's clear that you showed to us there is a time to understand when to stop and other times to get back in. And then as we started the conversation, Superwoman doing all these various things all together at the same time, you at that point decided, right, I'm going to go back into it. I'm going to take up a big role. You probably took your steps accordingly. And then there comes the time where you have to start managing a load of other people who also have their own problems and issues. How did that feel? And, being probably at that point a little bit more understanding of people's personal lives. How did it feel to go into that no more just managing I've got a project that I need to deliver. So I got these 3-4 skills that I can bring in with these people from finance and all various other things.
Yeah.
Actually, now you got your own team. How did that feel jumping into that space? And what approach did you take to actually build a good team at that point?
Yeah, so I think it's important to maybe paint a little bit of context to where I am. So procurement is kind of like, I would say, in the startup phase in the organization. We're kind of like in between this operation, transactional. We're nowhere. It's all about speed because we're growing as an organization. So, the classic mature procurement where it's more around, maybe more being a strategic business partner. I think that, or even having like spend visibility or control. We're not even there yet, right?
Yeah,
okay, so at the moment, the team is really much more focused on, or procurement's existence is around compliance, regulatory compliance, and I kind of want to shift that eventually to having some control, like even spend visibility, which we all know, like you can't control what you can't see, and then towards more the 3 C's, control, compliance, control, and then commercial. It's a bit more strategic, a bit more embedded into that layer of conversation, which I think any CPO actually aspires towards to, right? But it's a journey. It's definitely a journey. And I think really with building the team, I actually find it... I find it stretching or actually developing new muscles in me. Yeah. So learning to understand, as you said, managing people. I've actually also seen people who said, like, I don't want to be a manager. And I'm like, I get you. Because being a manager, you can be a mediocre manager and you just manage the job or the tasks. But you want to be a leader, then you have to sell a vision. B, you have to get them together to that vision, earn trust and loyalty of your team members. There was actually a recent point in time where this was really super great because I didn't get what I want as from my manager.
Yeah, of course.
I said, okay, I'm also being managed, right?
Yeah.
And I leaned in on my team and I said, like, look, I'm really not feeling great. I'm feeling a little bit demotivated and everything. And they said, look, I just remember my one of my team members saying, Claribelle, take the time off, pack your bags. Here you go. Here's your bag. Go out, have a day off. The team's got your back. And just to actually hear that was gold. Because for me, I'm like, I might not know the path where we're going, or I'm sorry, I may not know. I know where we want to go. I may not know how specifically we're going to get there, or I might be facing blockers, or you're not going to get this resource. Make do with what you have, or any kind of like messaging, right? Or okay, there's more work, and or there's little guidance. There's a lot of changes, but you don't know how to implement those changes. But I think having a core team that's got your back.
Yeah.
That's gold.
Yeah.
That's gold. So.
And it's probably driven a lot by your own leadership approach, which sounds collaborative and supportive. So if you created a team which wants to support you in that moment, which is a work-related thing, you are probably demotivated by the fact that you are getting your way in his highly complex scenario, which would be at that point of seniorship. It's normal. It's good to have a team which backs you. So creating this team, do you have a certain approach? Do you go by skill set? Do you typically, because we talked about a little bit of introversion, extroversion, you want to have a complete team, right?
Yeah.
How do you go about selecting what is a good team for you before even just looking at finding the right person? What do you do? What steps would you recommend for anyone who wanted to do this?
So, I mean, I think it goes without saying that when in any interview, you really want to establish that there's a certain level of competency, right?
Yeah.
Because there's I don't think we can remove that from the equation. You need to, particularly if it's depending on the skill set, and for me, it's really much more transformational. A lot of the things that we do, we're writing the playbook. There's no playbook.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's like, okay, we have to write the playbook, or there is a kind of a playbook, but it's not working. So we're going to have to be, you have to be comfortable with change. So a lot of I'm developing muscles of actually, I've built the team. So at least I had a say in terms of like selecting the people. I know my husband has a different muscle because right now he did that. Now he's inherited team,
yes.
And that's a different muscle. So I haven't been in that situation yet where I've inherited a team, but any, CPO can say, okay, there are two very different skill sets, right? Like building a team versus inheriting a team. But I think there's something, a common denominator there, which is, again, this authenticity, building the trust, right? There have been conversations where giving clear feedback, setting expectations very clearly as well. What's in it for me, what's in it for you, what's in it for us together, and establishing that. When I've had my career conversations with them, I'm like, okay, well, here's what good looks like for the company, but here's what good looks like for you, and how does that work together? Like, let's do that, and what are those building blocks? Also, sometimes there's conversations where I've said, like, look, that kind of empathy, that knowing sometimes there are periods in your life that maybe you have a lot of things going on, your personal, or you're sick. At one point, I thought, like, okay, well, if you need to work part-time, and we'll make do. I'll give you a part-time workload too, because that doesn't mean that, there are sometimes people get work part-time hours, but actually full-time workload. But, just even, I think, offering that opportunity and saying, like, I'm going to take care of you. And I think if you take care of your team, they take care of you. It's a win-win.
What's the big challenges which are coming up for procurement? And if you could also lead on from that to, if you were recommending to anyone looking at you and going, right, how do I achieve the same things? Give them maybe 1, 2, 3 tips of what they should do to achieve the same level of success.
Okay, 2 questions into one. Okay, but let's. I think, future of procurement, I think we play a pivotal role in being that hub. And as I mentioned about the hub and many spokes. So there's obviously all these, talk about AI, automation, data-driven procurement, ESG. I suppose, like, that's a topic for a different conversation. But it's about the right tools for the right job. Right. Okay. So it's around, using AI to be able to speed up your decision making, or data-driven, data-driven procurement to speed that one up. There's always going to be a human element in procurement, in terms of, like, you can't replace the context, the culture. It's a human interaction. And I think anyone who's pursuing a career in procurement would actually thrive, and who loves that human element will thrive in that. I mean, that's I think a very key. And just in terms of advice, I suppose, really group it into 3s. I kind of like to think about it that way. Just summarizing our conversation as well. So the past forms who you are. So, look at adversity, look at all your failures, take all the learnings from there, in order for you to be, at the present, be self-aware. Constantly be self-aware, reflect on who you are, bring your authentic self, build the trust by delivering in the now. There's no point if you're selling your future if you can't actually build the trust now. And then in the future is really setting a vision. I think is really important. If your next week is only about, like, next what you're supposed to do today, then, as a procurement leader, you won't be progressing. It's always like, what are we doing today or this week that takes us to the next step next year, or in the next year, in a couple of years to come? And having that vision, selling that vision, but also aligning that vision is actually important.
So planning and make sure that you know what you're doing, or look at the future as such.
Yeah.
Great.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you for that, Clary.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
At Procurato, we're lucky enough to work with some incredible experts like you, and we are able to therefore interview some great people for you to get an understanding and learn from. If you feel like you've got a great story that you could share with us, please do reach out to me. If you like what you see, please drop us a like and drop us a follow. Thanks.